ready to preach. Okay. I just needed to hype myself up. I needed something. I feel good. Y'all feel good? Hey, how many of you you've got a hype song? How many of you got some song, something that before a game you're going to put on, something that on your way to school you're going to put on, something that while you're getting ready you're putting on, right? Something you got to get you, and it can't be exciting if you're doing this. You know, it's got to be like piano. Right? So, but we all know that if you've got a party going on and you guys are three of the J-Box party right now, and if you're invited to a good party, you know that there's going to be good music. In fact, sometimes, how many of you have ever been to like a wedding or something with a DJ where you had like an official DJ, right? Here's what a good DJ will do. A good DJ doesn't play the best song as soon as everybody arrives. Quite often, they're saving some good stuff. And so, like, you're in there a little bit, and there's some fun stuff. You know, you're like, yeah. And then near the end of the night, the DJ puts on a song, and you're like, that's my song! Ah, right? And then you start doing the church clap, right? And you're like, this is me, right? When the song hits, and you're ready, it comes alive. But here's the thing. We love those moments, and still, every celebration that you have ever been to, every party, best friend's birthday party, all of those came to an end. And when it ended, we couldn't wait for the next best thing. And I want to talk to you this morning about the kinds of celebrations that Jesus has. We talked last week, Andrew preached to us last week about Jesus dying on the cross for you, and it was so visceral, just what he had to endure for us. It was incredible. But this week, we're going to talk about the resurrection. Now, when Jesus came back to life, this is, I don't want to undersell it, this is the most important thing that has ever happened in human history. Everybody who has lived on earth long ago, they all have died. Okay, that's not news to anybody. There's a lot of people that have died because that's what people do at the end. They pass. Jesus did something at the end that nobody saw coming. He came back to life, right? He broke the human story. He changed history. It'd be one thing if Jesus just died, but he died and came back to life. And at that moment, everything goes, oh my goodness, this is crazy. This is different. But at the moment that Jesus did change all of history, his celebration looked a little different. In fact, I want to look right now at what Jesus did when he came back to life. If you got a Bible, go to Luke chapter 24. Now, parts of this story appear in the different Gospels. All of them tell the story about this because it's really important. But it's so interesting the way that it actually happens. You have to recognize that on the day that, let's just get in. Luke chapter 24, and then I'll set it up a little bit. Luke chapter 24, verse 1. It says this. Very early on Sunday morning, the women went to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. Okay, so Sunday morning, this is Easter morning. Sunday morning, the women, notice it's not any of the guys. None of the guys were going. They were all broken, sad, and scared. None of them had left. The women go, and it says they're bringing spices. Now, I know that looks like they're about to cook chicken, but that's not what spices is necessarily about at this point. Back in that time, one of the ways that you would honor a dead person is that you would embalm or put ointment on them. You would put things on them that are fragrant. And so the women go, they don't go because they're like, hey, guess what? Jesus is going to be back today. They go, and this is the saddest day probably of their lives. They're not going to the tomb going, let's go, right? They don't have a hype song on. They're not listening to the exciting thing. They're going to the tomb because they're about to look at their friend. They're about to look at his dead body. They're going to the tomb because somebody that they've loved and cared about for years is gone. They're going to the tomb expecting brokenness. And on their way, they're actually talking about, hey, who's going to move the stone? Back in that day, they would put stones to cover a tomb. In fact, here's an example. Some scholars think it looked like this, where it's a giant, like 2,000-pound rock that gets shoved in to the opening, right? How many of you have ever lifted 2,000 pounds before? Weird. Nobody? Okay. So here's the thing. All of these women are going to the tomb, and they're like, "Hey, by the way, who's going to move that? Who's going to move that stone? This is going to be a problem." But they get there, and the Bible says that the stone is moved. Something new is happening, but it's different. It's not what they expected. We're continuing in verse 3. It says this: they went in, but they didn't find the body. Okay. Now this has got to be a weird moment. Have you ever gone to somebody's house and it was the wrong house? Have you ever walked into a classroom and it was not your classroom? Have you ever gone to a party thinking it was one kind of party but it was another kind of party? Check this out. Like, what happens if you go to a costume party but you're wearing the wrong costume? Do we? Maybe. I will wait no longer. Okay, moving on. So, sometimes we show up and we're expecting one thing and something else happens instead. The women show up, they're expecting a closed tomb and a dead body. There's an open tomb and no body. And then the craziest part is, y'all saw how big that tomb was, right? Okay, not that large of a room. In fact, maybe a good size estimate would probably be smaller than that thing right there. So imagine all of that smaller than this. They would probably would have had shelves inside because they would have put different people in there. Okay? And so they go in, not a crazy amount of room. In fact, if you walk into that room, you can see the whole room when you come in, right? Like if you go into a small little tomb like that, it's not like you're walking in and you're not recognizing two glowing people inside. It's not like they walked in and they were like, oh, we didn't see you there, right? Not like that scenario at all. What actually happened is they walked in and two guys appeared. That's terrifying. It says two men appeared to them. And here's what it says. The women were terrified. No, duh, right? The women were terrified. Of course they were terrified. Two guys showed up. This looks like the wrong tomb. The stone is moved. Nothing is the way that we thought this was going to be. But when Jesus comes to do something new, he doesn't do it the way that we think he would. They fell with their faces to the ground. The men asked, why are you looking among the dead for someone who is alive? He isn't here. He is risen from the dead. The men go on and tell the women, hey, this is exactly what Jesus said was going to happen to him. And the women run from this scene, and it says they go back to all of Jesus' disciples, and they say, guys, Jesus came back to life. We saw two angels. This is a big deal. And this is the best part. It says, but the everyone else, they told them, but the story sounded like nonsense, so they didn't believe it. What's so interesting to me is that Jesus, through the greatest moment in history, and there's no hype track, and there's no confetti, and there's no appetizers or dessert. This is a moment where Jesus is doing something brand new, incredible, powerful, and it looks so different from what we would do. So we're going to talk in a little bit about why Jesus does something new and it looks different. But for right now, let's do this. Let's turn into our tag groups, and we're going to have a couple of minutes there to talk together, and then we'll be back. We were talking in our group about getting something new, and there's something nice. How many of you have ever bought a brand new book before, and it's got a crisp smell and it's got a crisp feel? You know, it feels a little different. But I have a book right now. Some of our leaders are reading a book right now called Spiritual Leadership, and I have a copy from the 1970s. And the pages are yellow, and like the pages are a different color. The cover is messed up a little bit, right? Things change over time. When we get something new, we want it to like smell good. We want it to taste good. Like here's the thing: if you open up a brand new like bag of goldfish, you want that to smell cheesy. You don't want that to smell moldy, right? Right? Yeah. Like if you open something new, you expect it to be at its very, very best. And Jesus has the greatest celebration, and it feels so different. When the world wants to celebrate something, they make a giant deal about it. They advertise, they blow it up, they make sure everybody's coming, they hype it to the max. When Jesus does the most important thing in history, almost no one is there to see it. When Jesus does the most important thing in history, the first people to find it are surprised. They don't see him in that moment. The stone is already moved. When Jesus begins to do something new, Jesus' new looks different than what we sometimes expect. And I think that's so important because sometimes we can look at God and say, God, I don't think you're doing anything in my life. And God's going, you're looking for me in the wrong way. Jesus was doing something amazing and new. 2 Corinthians 5:17 tells us that God is doing something new. Here's what it says. Anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. Their old life is gone, and a new life has begun. And all of this is a gift from God who brought us back to himself through Christ. And God has given us this task of reconciling people to him. Reconcile is a big word, but here's what it means. It means making people new. So the Bible says that God made us new. He's making us new. And he gave us an opportunity to help other people be new. You know what? When I was in middle school, I was a follower of Jesus. I grew up in church, and so I believed in Jesus all of my life, but I remember at 13 having a moment where I said, okay, Jesus, not only do I believe in you, but you're in charge. More than just like, hey, I believe in you, but I want to give you my life. And you know what's crazy? I gave my life to Jesus on a Friday, and on Monday, going back to school, I knew God was doing a new thing in me, but I also had this fear that I didn't want my friends to see, and I didn't want them to think that I was like different. Sometimes in my middle school days, I would go to JVOX and they would preach something, and I'd be like, oh man, God, you're speaking right to me. I need that. And then I didn't necessarily want to be new, though, because I thought it would be weird if I changed. But the Bible tells us that God is trying to do something new in us. And so this morning, you are invited to a party where Jesus makes you new. Because let's be honest, the old is old. Let's be honest, the way that we've always lived life is broken. Sin is broken. We, on our own, we are not perfect. We're not close to perfect. I know some of you think I'm the greatest thing that has ever happened on planet Earth. And I'm proud that you think that. But you're not. You are amazing. But there are new things that God is trying to do in you. You know, just like every party that you've ever been to, no matter how much music is there, no matter how much food is there, no matter how many games are there, eventually you're exhausted, you're worn down, eventually it's no longer fun, eventually you want to go home and sleep in your own bed. Maybe that's just me at my age. But those old things will pass, and yet God does something better than anything we could experience in this world. Jesus can do something new constantly, even when you don't see it. I love the way that Jesus does the most important thing. And all of the women who are running to that tomb are having the worst day of their life, and yet, even at the worst, Jesus is doing something amazing. Do you know that you could be having something terrible happening in your family, and God is doing something amazing? You could be having a terrible season at school, and God is actually working something new that is powerful. There could be something happening with your friend group, and God is doing something new. So this morning, there's 2 invitations I have to ask you to. Number 1 is this. Will you let Jesus make you new? And seriously, let Jesus make you new, because I recognize that there are moments in my own life that I would say, God, I want you. Jesus, I want you. And then the very next day, I'd be like, but I don't want to look different, and I don't want to act different, and I don't want to change, and I still want what I want. And we've got to let Jesus do something new inside of us. Let Jesus make you new. Some of you are going to have to turn to Jesus and say, Jesus, there's this thing in me. I had a conversation with somebody who said, I really hate this person, and I need prayer. That's an example of a place where God needs to make you new. Recently, I had somebody come up to me and say, hey, I've been trying for a really long time to forgive people, but I just keep getting mad at them. That's an area where you need God to make you new. Somebody came up to me recently sharing, hey, I'm stuck in this sin. I keep doing it again and again and again. That's an area where you need God to make you new. So let Jesus make you new. That's number 1. That's your first invitation. The second one is this. Let Jesus do it his way. Because the way that Jesus is going to do it is probably different than what you want. Do you know what all of us want? All of us want instant fireworks, confetti, party, and it's all fixed. Hey, Jesus, make me patient forever. Thanks. And what Jesus is going to do is he's going to say, great. The lunch line today is going to be really long. Your sibling is not going to get out of your room even when you ask 15 times. I'm going to grow patience in you. And it's going to be a new thing that I'm doing in you. Let me do it my way.